Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for Malikah's Well. This is the 4th leveling dungeon made available by patch 5.0 in Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. So you've entered the dungeon, told all the mobs around you to mind their own business, and thinking all is well and good, but eventually you'll find yourself between a rock and a hard place saying, "Hey Miz, tell us how to clear this dungeon." Luckily for you, beneath this rocky exterior lies a big softy. My name is Miztech, and I'll be your dungeon guide. This first section of trash has some pretty traditional pulls. Watch for the AoE attacks as you burn everything down. The first boss is the Greater Armadillo. Stone Flail will slam the tank with a heavy-hitting tank buster. Cool down and heal through this as necessary. A number of AoE circles will also appear on the ground, and players will need to move out of these to avoid the falling rocks. Head Toss will target a random player with the stack-up marker. Group up to share the damage. This attack will also cause the armadillo to drop its tail rock thingy, causing it to then cast right round to pick it back up. This will deal damage and knock back in a point-blank area around the boss. While all of this is happening, more rocks are falling from the ceiling. Flail Smash will deal proximity-based damage, and all players need to move away to reduce damage. The armadillo will jump to this marker, and then a large donut AoE will form, with even more falling rock AoEs. Players will need to move into the safe zones to avoid getting hit by any of these attacks. 2-pack armadillos can also spawn that should be picked up by the tank. These are relatively weak and can be destroyed quickly. From this point on, the mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. In this next section of trash, be on the lookout for the patrolling cupbearers. Tanks should be ready to pick these up quickly. Aside from that, remember to avoid those pesky AoE attacks while you burn everything down. The second boss is the Amphibious Talus. Ephes is a heavy-hitting tank buster. Cool down and heal through this as necessary. Throughout the encounter, the boss will move into the center of the room and cast WELLBORE, a very large point-blank AoE attack. Players will need to move out of this to avoid damage. Immediately after, 4 smaller AoE circles will spawn in a set pattern around the room and eventually spawn WATERSPOUTS. High pressure will knock back all players away from the center. To avoid excess damage and debuffs, players will need to position themselves in between 2 WATERSPOUTS to avoid getting knocked straight into one. Immediately after, the boss will channel Swift Spill while rotating in one direction. To avoid damage, knockback, and debuffs, players will have to move behind the boss and rotate with him as he turns to blast each section of the room. Once he makes a full turn, the WATERSPOUTS will disappear. From this point on, the mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. Remember to avoid getting knocked into the WATERSPOUTS and stay behind him during Swift Spill. In this last section of the dungeon, players will have the opportunity to destroy the mobs before they activate by focusing damage. Once they are active, be on the lookout for those typical attacks. Finally, we reach the last boss, Storage. Intestinal Crank will deal group-wide damage. Healers beware. Heretic's Fork will cause a bright square pattern to appear around the boss. Eventually, a cross-shaped AoE will blast out from the boss. To avoid high damage and debuffs, players will need to move to one of the corners of the square pattern. Breaking Wheel will cause a room-wide AoE blast with only a small circle inside the boss's hitbox as the safe zone. All players will need to move into the hitbox to avoid damage and debuffs during this time. Crystal Nail will call down 4 feathers around the boss. Avoid these AoE circles as they drop down and move appropriately to avoid either Heretic's Fork or Breaking Wheel from the boss. Immediately after, the boss will cast Censure, and each feather nail will copy the boss's previous attack in a clockwise order, starting with the south feather. Players will need to adjust for these AoEs as necessary to avoid death. After all 4 feathers blast their attack, the boss will again cast the same attack. From this point on, the mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. Whether the boss casts Heretic's Fork or Breaking Wheel is random, so be on the lookout for each telegraph and be ready to move as necessary, especially when the nails come down to copy those attacks. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we ascend into Mount Golg. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.